Since civilizations have existed, people have traded. The first recorded state to use recognisable coins as currency was the Kingdom of Lydia in as early as the 5th-6th century BC. Meanwhile, states such as Olbia chose to take a more scenic route, transitioning from trading with bronze ingots to traditional coinage through the medium of small metal dolphins, such as this one. Comparatively, the Romans were rather late to the party, hitting the markets of the assignatum, the first true example of Roman coinage, around the start of the 3rd century BC. However, they were well worth the wait. Throughout the next 7 centuries, the Romans churned out billions of coins, spanning over 300 years of republican rule and at least 70 different emperors, each holding within them a priceless mine of information for future historians. And now, thousands of years later, it seems in some ways not much has changed at all. We still mint important events on our coinage. For example, here's a 50p commemorating the coronation of King Charles III. And for another example, here's 50p commemorating joining of the European Union in 1973. And here's 25 years of us being in the European Union. And here's us leaving the European Union. But that's not even where the resemblance stops. Here's a 50p with Paddington Bear on it, which is actually, when you think about it, not too different to this Roman denarius of Domitian with Pegasus on it. So you see, coins have always been used to both send a message and tell a story, and the coins of ancient Rome are some of the most fascinating examples of this. Certain coins in particular, however, are more interesting than most. Let me start with my 18th birthday present from my parents. Here they are, a pair of worn silver coins, Roman denarii to be exact, complete with the fine portraits of a man and a woman, husband and wife perhaps, although their identities are quite hard to tell at first. The tag they came with reads, a nice group of solid silver denarius coins circa 1st to 4th century BC, Norfolk excavations 1970s. So, not a lot of information to go on, but enough. And I can in fact tell you that they are Faustina Major and her husband, the Emperor Antoninus Pius. Easily identifiable by the convenient fact that the only legible part of their inscriptions is in fact their names. Well, there is actually 2 prominent Faustinas in Imperial Roman history that we should be aware of. That is Faustina Major and her daughter Faustina Minor, who married her adoptive brother Marcus Aurelius. Yet we can be certain that this in fact is Faustina Major from a simple detail, which is her distinctive hairstyle, the braided bun on top of her head, which was emulated by the women of Rome throughout her reign and immortalised on her portraits. So, now that we've ascertained that we do in fact know what these coins are, let's take a closer look and see what they can show us, just as I did as soon as I got them. So, if we look at the Faustina coin first, you can see on the obverse, on the right hand side, you can read the words Faustina. Now on the left, it's a little harder to read on my coin, but I can tell you it says Diva. And you can see the portrait there with the hairstyle, like I said. On the reverse, we have a figure of the goddess Ceres, with a veil above her head, and round the edge, although again you can't read it on this example of the coin, is the word Eternatus. Now let's look at the Antoninus Pius coin. Now, I must confess this was a harder coin to figure out the inscription on because I couldn't actually find a lot of examples of it on the internet, but from what I could make out, I think the inscription on the obverse reads Antoninus Pius, Org, PP, TRP, XVI. Now, Org stands for Augustus, PP stands for Pater Patriae, and TRP stands for Tribuna Potestas. Now, on the reverse, we have the figure of Equitus seated holding scales and a cornucopia. And round the edge, we have TRP, VII, IMP, VCOS 3. As you can see, there are many, many things to explore on these coins, and by the end of my talk, I hope to have explained all of them. But let's go in first with the hard hitter. The inscription Diva Faustina. Divine Faustina. Faustina is dead. So, I should probably back up now and offer a little context. Antoninus Pius was the Emperor of Rome from 138 to 161 AD. He was the adopted son and successor of the Emperor Hadrian, and is commonly considered to be the fourth of the 5 good emperors, that is, the Nerva-Antonine dynasty. Now, Antoninus Pius isn't really the name that pops into your head when someone says, name a Roman emperor. In fact, when you Google who was the most boring Roman emperor, Antoninus Pius's Wikipedia page pops up. Now, it wasn't that he was a bad emperor. Like I said, we've just ascertained that he was, in fact, quite a good emperor. It's just, he didn't really do much. He was a cautious, level-headed sort of guy. He preferred to stay in Rome and build temples rather than go out and conquer places. But the most important thing that you should know about Antoninus Pius is that he loved his wife Faustina. He adored her, so much so that when she died only 3 years into his reign, he made her a goddess. I mean, that is the standard right there. If your husband doesn't deify you when you die, does he really love you? But that in itself wasn't too much of a dramatic statement for ancient Rome, because apotheosis, that is the elevation of someone to divine status, was common practice for members of the imperial household by this point in the empire. Hadrian had even had his youthful lover Antinous deified after he drowned in the Nile. In fact, he deified him so thoroughly that he founded a whole city and named it after him. So, clearly a flair for passionate apotheosis ran in the family, for by the death of Faustina, Antoninus was an old hand at it, having allegedly earned his cognomen Pius from his relentless persuasion of the Senate to grant divine honours to Hadrian, despite their initial refusal. But this clearly wasn't enough pioneering for Pius, for the apotheosis of Faustina was like nothing quite seen before, and nowhere was this clearer than through the coinage of Diva Faustina. Following the apotheosis of a family member, common practice was to mint a coin or two commemorating their consecratio, that is, their soul ascending from the mortal plane and flying up to the heavens, usually depicted on coins of the dead figure on the back of an eagle. However, that was usually the end of the posthumous coinage. Some emperors chose to extend the issue a little, such as Tiberius with the posthumous coinage of Augustus, although who can really blame him for trying to curry a little favour with the populace, trying to counteract his own unpopularity with the nationwide popularity of Augustus. But even in instances such as this, where we can see an example here, we've got portrait of Augustus on this coin, but it is definitely minted by Tiberius. But yes, in instances such as this, usually, even if it was extended, they would repeat the same coin types over and over. You wouldn't be minting lots of new coins. It would just be the same ones for a longer period. Antoninus Pius, on the other hand, shunned this convention, minting over 20 years' worth of ever-changing Diva Faustina coinage. For every 2 coins struck of his portrait, he struck one with hers. That's 1/3 of the empire's coinage minted in the name of a dead woman. But Diva Faustina's coinage's historical value is a lot more than just a declaration of a husband's love. It's actually the earliest visual evidence of many of the ceremonies associated with a Roman imperial state funeral. Since Faustina was adored not only by Antoninus, but by the patrician and plebeian populace alike, she was naturally voted many funeral honours, including carpentum, being carried in a carriage drawn by mules, and currus elephantorum, involving her image being paraded in a chariot drawn by elephants. These honours were in turn depicted on coinage, and here you can see a brass sestertius depicting currus elephantorum. You see the elephants here. Naturally, this is a hugely valuable historical source, as it adds a whole new dimension to the written sources we have of imperial state funerals, which are actually quite numerous and include descriptions from all the big names such as Suetonius, Cassius Dio, Appian and Tacitus. In Suetonius' description of Caesar's funeral, he writes that a pyre was erected in the field of Mars, and Diva Faustina's funeral pyre issue coinage shows that even around 100 years later, the public funeral pyre was still a huge part of the imperial state funeral. Now, another similar example of coinage being a valuable source depicting Roman customs is actually Augustus's provincial issue coinage. Here we have one depicting the ploughing of sacred boundaries. The pomerium. As you can see with this coin here, it's very small, but you've got two priests leading a couple oxen, and they are ploughing the pomerium, which is the sacred boundary. And this is for the colony founded by Augustus in Philippi after the Battle of Philippi. So this sacred custom dates back to the Etruscan culture and is clearly very important to the Romans, as Virgil writes of Aeneas ploughing a pomerium in Aeneid 5. But the commemoration of important Roman events and customs, however, is not even close to the sole takeaway from coin design. Another fascinating thing to study is the importance of family connection to the Romans. It's littered across their coinage. You can't escape it even if you wanted to. And obviously, the pure existence of Faustina's coinage is a wonderful illustration of this point. However, it runs deeper than that, even within her coinage. For example, the obverse inscription, Diva Augusta Faustina, is characteristic of her early posthumous issues. However, experts, through the coin dating method of creating die-link chains, now this is a really cool way of creating timelines of the coins from large enough sample of coins by marking the overlaps in the obverse and reverse dies and then comparing them with historical sources. But yes, experts discovered that this inscription appears again later in the series of coins, on coins depicting the marriage of Faustina Minor and Marcus Aurelius. So this is demonstrating how Faustina's daughter is also becoming an Augusta. Interestingly, the other main Diva Faustina coin design minted around this time, in order to be handed out at the wedding, is a coin commemorating the charity that Antoninus founded in the memory of Faustina, which he named Puellae Faustinae. Its function was to provide for the destitute girls of Rome, and in this way, it can actually be seen that her familiar duty extends beyond her own daughter and to thousands of Roman girls. As we saw earlier, Antoninus Pius earned the title Pater Patriae later in his reign, Father of the Fatherland, and I think it could be argued that although her reign didn't last long, Faustina can be seen to be the Mater Patriae of Rome during that period. With regards to her own daughter, however, her motherly nature is reflected even more strongly through her coinage. Ceres is one of the most common deities to appear on the reverse of Faustina's coins. We saw it earlier on mine. However, at one point in the coinage, a very subtle design change occurs. So usually, Ceres is depicted holding one torch. However, there was noted that a coin design with Ceres holding two torches appeared. And it just so happens that this design coincided with the birth of Faustina Minor's first child, and thus the advent of her motherhood. And so experts studied similar two-torched figures on stone reliefs, and they discovered that the deity is actually a representation of the goddess Kor, or Proserpina, Ceres' daughter. So not only does this strengthen the link between Faustina Major and Faustina Minor, it also creates the link between Faustina Minor and her own daughter, Annia Faustina. Examples of family connections being promoted through the use of coinage for political gain, however, were a lot more common within Rome. Here we have a sesterces of coinage of Claudius, minted to commemorate his dead brother Germanicus. Now, it is highly unlikely that this was done out of pure brotherly love, and a lot more likely to be because Germanicus was hugely popular in Rome during his lifetime, and even just as much after his death, although Tiberius did actively persecute a lot of his supporters. That didn't do much to diminish his popularity. So the fact still remains that Claudius was likely to gain some popularity and support by aligning himself with Germanicus. Antoninus Pius, on the other hand, is a particularly interesting emperor, since the Diva Faustina coinage was localised mainly to Rome. So it seems less likely that he had underlying political motivations, and a lot more likely that the coins were minted out of love for her as a means of keeping her memory alive. We can see this especially since he built a huge temple for her in the Roman Forum, making her the first empress with a permanent presence there. He then also minted coins to commemorate the building of the temple. But the final really fascinating thing I want to talk about is how you can learn from the reverses of coinage exactly how an emperor or empress wished people to perceive them. For example, Antoninus Pius most commonly used the goddess Ceres, as I mentioned before, and sometimes Juno on the reverses of Diva Faustina's coinage. As you can see, both goddesses are associated with motherhood and being a good wife, which is clearly how he wanted Faustina to be remembered. Juno especially is a goddess often used on the coinage of empresses because she's queen of the gods. However, another prominent deity on Diva Faustina's coinage is Eternatus, the divine personification of eternity. If we return to the coins I got for my birthday, we can see roughly where the inscription Eternatus would have been, despite the figure actually being Ceres. Antoninus Pius's denarius, on the other hand, has the deity Equitus on the reverse, a deity that is the personification of justice and equality. Similarly, many of his coins portray the deity Concordia, the embodiment of agreement in marriage and society, which demonstrates his peaceful, loving nature and how he was a fair and firm ruler. However, other of his coins have depictions of Jupiter, husband of Juno, aligning him with strength, leadership and power. Different emperors quite often actually tended to have favourite deities, either that they felt particularly aligned with them, or they just really worshipped or respected a lot. These frequented their coinage. Domitian, for example, had a preference for Minerva, which we see across his coins. However, Constantine the Great favoured the more eastern god, Sol Invictus. He was associated with military cults. You can see him on this coin here, Sol Invictus on the reverse. Diocletian, on the other hand, had a fondness for Jupiter and Hercules, and we can see this on this coin of Diocletian. The inscription reads Jove et Herc. But yeah, there you have it. A brief introduction into Antoninus Pius and Faustina and what you can learn from their coinage. But my favourite thing about all of this is that you can take away all the detail, the meticulously researched historical knowledge, and you're left with just this coin. The worn-out face of a woman that a man loved so much that thousands of years ago he struck thousands of coins in her name so that Rome would never forget her, so that he could hold on to her for just a little longer. And here I am, and because of this coin, I too know how much Antoninus Pius loved Faustina.